this has been going on for a very long time. So that is the cycle of sin for humanity. What happens over time is what we call generational curses. Now, when we get in that up and down path, but we continue to go down, it gets into a behavior pattern where we're making very poor decisions. And after that, it seems like, especially with our children and people watching, it becomes a generational thing where it happens over and over again. You see that in addiction and abuse, especially, and that is the consequences of sin. So generational curses is something that can be stopped. How? With repentance again. Stop the behavior and turning away. And it's that simple.
This is a very important point here. It's what the Bible actually also refers to when it talks about the sin of Balaam. Balaam cast a sort of a spell on Israel, and it had to do with their way of life and the generational way of life. And what we're finding now, unfortunately, in practically every aspect of life, that we're on a downslide. We could look at health, we could look at music. One of the key factors of this downslide is parenting. And we could also talk about smartphones. Smartphones have created havoc for our young people in particular. And this is, as Katrina said, one of the reasons that we have mental health problems. And we're not solving those mental health problems. As we saw on this prior slide here, where it talks about crying out for help during disaster and crisis. There are many people crying out for help now, and they're saying they see the problems, but they're crying out for help, and we're applying human solutions to these problems. We're not crying out for the proper help, and we're not applying the proper help, that is, the godly help, to these problems. And in fact, the solutions that we are applying are unfortunately creating further problems for us, and hence we get into this generational cycle that Katrina is referring to.
Yes. And then we go back to the cycle again. So then we have God's interaction with the Israelites. Again, the cleansing process was when they were crossing the Red Sea, and it's talked about that in 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 2. And then it was character development. Now in Numbers 13, it talks about the wilderness being them being in the wilderness because of their decision not to trust God. However, the highlight of the wilderness for those 40 years was they were able to learn God's rules. So they were there in that time really focusing on God's rules, and it was just God and them. So they didn't have influence with pagans and other people around them. But then it was that wonderful time where they got with Joshua and they believed and they went into Canaan. But going into that area was going to be the trial because they were going to be around pagan influence. And around that pagan influence, that's when they started having problems. And instead of going, which they had ups and downs, but then they went on a downward spiral. And God warned them of what was happening. He warned them in Deuteronomy 15. It gives the consequences of what happens when you start not following God's rules.
Uncover the mystery of Adam and Eve's nakedness. Unravel the ambiguous connection between the Hebrew term for naked and the serpent's subtlety. Join us for this free mini-course and gain a profound new perspective on biblical Hebrew. TheExplanation.com/naked